students, I'm Aanchal Sharma, your educator for paper 1. We have been discussing some PYQs and concepts related to environment in the course that we have, that is the last lab. So exams are approaching, and today also I thought that let us first discuss all the protocols and all the agreements and then start with our class and solving the PYQs that I have for you. So this is going to be a great class. First of all, a longish class as compared to the other classes, and also in this class we are going to discuss environmental protocols and agreements. And all of these agreements and the small details that I have written for you are very important. Somewhere down the line you will find questions from all these things, and also questions पूछे भी जा चुके हैं इन सब चीजों से. So we have been seeing that these things are repeatedly asked. Also we discussed in the previous video about Paris Agreement, Kyoto Protocol, and we all know that all of these things are repeatedly asked. So right now also I have other conventions as well and other agreements, and you will find questions from these as well. So first of all we'll discuss all of these things and then we'll jump to the questions. Now without wasting, let us see the first convention that we have, and this is our very own RAMSAR convention. So RAMSAR convention was the first convention. So before RAMSAR there were few small initiatives that could have been taken by the government, but not much was being done for the protection of the wetlands or for the environment per se. So after RAMSAR, we actually thought that yes, we have to protect the different wetlands and the different areas near the water bodies because they are deteriorating at a greater extent. So what did we do? We said that there would be an initiative that would look for the protection of the different wetlands that we have. Not only wetlands, but the other flora and fauna near that wetland, or the other biodiversity that we have, the mangroves that we have near all these things, all these wetlands would also be protected. So there are some criterias, about 9 criterias. You can Google all of these things, that what are the basic criterias from which you will actually think that this, or you will consider this site as a particular RAMSAR site. So when this particular site fulfills those 9 criterias or few criterias out of it, then they are termed as the RAMSAR sites. So these RAMSAR sites, basically, this is the establishment year of this RAMSAR convention is 1971. Very important, dates are very important whenever we talk about the different protocols and conventions. And this was started, why? This was started for the conservation and for the sustainable utilization of all the wetlands. Now in this we are looking at the biodiversities, the flora and the fauna and everything related to the wetlands that we have. Another name, if they ask you, it is also known as the Waterfowl Convention. So it is also known as Waterfowl Convention, and India is a part of it. So I have been asking you to read more about RAMSAR Convention, how many RAMSAR sites, because again and again we see that there are few RAMSAR sites that are added. So 11 RAMSAR sites were added recently as well. So you should know how many RAMSAR sites are there. Hence we have the first convention, that is the RAMSAR Convention, established in 1971. What is the basic goal? The basic goal is the conservation and the sustainable development utilization of all the wetlands. Then we have the Stockholm Declaration. Now Stockholm Declaration is different than convention. This time we are talking about the Stockholm Declaration. It became very important. It held, first of all, it was established in 1972. It became very important. Why? Because UNEP was established at this time. So we have the establishment of the UNEP. International protection of the environment is the basic purpose of your Stockholm Declaration. So what was the result? The result was UNEP, and we have discussed all of these things in greater detail. Now let us see the third convention that we have, and this was established in 1973. Important, first of all, 1973, the date, and this is called as CITES. This is CITES, CITES. This is Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. Now this is basically, you can say CITES is a convention. It is an international convention which will look at all the flora and the fauna that you have, or the endangered species that are included in these flora and fauna are protected. All the endangered species or the species that are about to get extinct, all of them are protected. They are are also protecting and preventing and looking at the international trading as well. So control or prevent the international commercial trade in the endangered species and the products derived from that. So this is not only the animals, the wild flora and the fauna that are to be protected, but the commercialization of all those animals and plants are also important, right? And you have to protect that not much commercialization is happening. So for example, we recently saw that there is Project Elephant also. And why was Project Elephant so famous? Because there were a lot of poaching and killing of animals like elephants, because their tusk is very useful. So there was export and import of their tusk and their skin. So we saw that there were a lot of deaths of different types of elephants. So what was it? So hence you have to protect and you have to prevent and control all of these species. All of this international commercial trading, export, import are to be minimized, so that you see that there are no flora and fauna that are suffering. So what is the full form? Again, it is important: Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. CITES came up in 1973. It is also known as the Washington Convention, and it is legally binding. So wherever you see this word legally binding, non-legally binding, now I'm sure that you are clear with all of these things. Legally binding means that if you are a part of this convention, then you are, if you don't follow this completely, it is punishable. It is an offense if you don't adhere to your commitments, right? Then we have CMS, another important full form that I have for you, that is Convention on Migratory Species. Now this convention, first of all, here we are looking at the endangered species, wild flora and fauna. Here we are looking at the migratory species. So CMS, Convention on Migratory Species, came up when it started in 1979. It is the Convention on the conservation of the migratory species of the wild animals. It is also known as the Bonn Convention, and it came under the UNEP. So when was UNEP established? We all saw that under Stockholm Declaration we came up with the UNEP, and UNEP, what is the full form? It is United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and under UNEP we have the Bonn Convention, also known as the CMS. CMS is also known as the Bonn Convention. What is CITES also known as? CITES is also known as the Washington Convention, right? So we all are clear with it. First of all, we have the RAMSAR Convention in 1971. What is it talking about? It is talking about the wetlands. It is talking about the protection and the safeguarding of the wetlands. It is also known as Waterfowl Convention. Then we have the Stockholm Declaration. We came up with the UNEP. What is UNEP? United Nations Environment Program. Then we have CITES 1973. It is also called as Washington Convention. It is legally binding. Then we have CMS, Convention on Migratory Species. Right, then let us move further. Now we have Nairobi Declaration. So Nairobi Declaration is for the achieving of the sustainable development. Now we start talking about the sustainable development. Why is this date of 1982 famous? This date we started with Nairobi Declaration. It became famous. Why? Because this was the date after 10 years of your Stockholm Declaration. So this is the 10th anniversary of Stockholm Declaration. After 10 years, we are again meeting and looking what was the progress. We are seeing what is basically the progress that we have done till now. So for achieving sustainable development, we met again, all these countries met again in 1982, and this is called as Nairobi Declaration. Then we have Vienna Convention. So Vienna Convention in 1985, and this is for the protection of the ozone layer. Now again, match the following way. They can definitely ask you all of these things. That is why I have written all the purpose and the other details on the different side, because I want you to remember all these things, which convention is talking about which thing. So Nairobi Declaration, they are talking about the sustainable development, and it is to review what? It is to review what we have done in the Stockholm Declaration. We came up with the UNEP. So again, they would be discussing about the Stockholm Declaration. It is on the 10th anniversary of Stockholm. Then we have Vienna Convention. It talks about the protection of ozone layer. It does not include legally binding reduction goals. So it is not legally binding. It has no fixed targets, but it is just a discussion, and they all should come together and all the countries should come together and take efforts for the protection. So it is not included in the legally binding section, right? Then we have very important, we have Montreal Protocol. We discussed it in greater detail. We'll discuss again. So Montreal Protocol came up in 1987, and it is to control the ozone depleting substances. So we discussed the ODS. The ODSs are basically the ozone depleting substances, and you have to protect it. So what is Vienna Convention talking? Vienna Convention will talk about the protection of the ozone layer and the measures taken to protect that. But to limit the use of the ozone depleting substances is what Montreal Protocol is talking about. It is a protocol to the Vienna Convention for the protection of ozone layer. So it is a protocol that started by the Vienna Convention. So first of all, we have Vienna Convention, which will actually tell us that yes, there are a lot of problems because the ozone layer is depleting. So what we'll be doing, we'll have one protocol. This protocol is called as the Montreal Protocol, which came up in 1987, and it will talk that we will reduce the use of those substances that is causing the depletion of the ozone layer. That means we will control the ozone depleting substances. So it is a protocol to Vienna Convention for the protection of ozone layer. Then what is happening? It is a universal treaty ratified by all the UN countries. So it is a universal treaty, you should remember. Again, very important, it is legally binding, and the targets only and the ozone depleting substances. This is not targeting on the GHG. What is GHG? These are the greenhouse gases. They are not targeting on the hydrochlorofluorocarbons or other greenhouse gases or perfluorocarbons. It is basically focusing on all those things that are depleting, it is focusing on all those things that are depleting the ozone layer, but it is not focusing on all those things that are included in the greenhouse gases, right? So they are not focusing on those things that are causing the greenhouse gas emission, but on the ozone depleting substances, right? Then we have the Brundtland report. Now this is important. Brundtland report was basically, the report was called as Our Common Future, and this report was the first thing that came up, and after this report we started to talk about the sustainable development more. So initially also we were discussing that yes, there is sustainable development, we should use the resources wisely, but this term sustainable development was made famous by Brundtland, and she gave a report as well, and this report is called as Our Common Future, and this is the concept given by her, that is the sustainable development. And when was this report seen? This report was seen in 1987. So in 1987 we came up with this report called as Our Common Future. Our Common Future, and we will be talking about the sustainable development, and the concept of sustainable development started from this. Then we have the most important thing to discuss, and this is the Earth Summit. So the Earth Summit, also called as, remember, United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, that means UNCED, and I'm sure that all my students in my class, we have all discussed it thoroughly, and we have seen so many things related to all of these conventions. With pictures we learned everything, so I just hope that you still remember, and if you're looking at the video you can revise all of these things. So we see how again and again these countries were meeting, and with the story format we learn all these things, and we are here at the Earth Summit now. In 1992 different countries met together and they decided that they are going to meet again and again, right? So we have Rio, they were meeting in Rio, so it is also called as Rio Declaration. It is also called as the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, that is UNCED, and it is also called as the Earth Summit. So this is the first time all of these countries are meeting, hence it is called as the Earth Summit. It is also called as the Rio Declaration and UNCED. You should know the names because they can ask questions related to all the Earth Summit using any name. right? So when was this date, when was this summit seen? It was seen in 1992. So in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, all of these parties met. So they are meeting in Rio, and you have to remember. Then we have the environment conservation and development as their aim. So they are talking about the environment conservation and the development protection of the biosphere. It had 27 principles and 3 legally binding agreements were signed. So this is very important. This is basically the father to 3 legally binding documents, and we learn all of these things in the class, and these are the 3 legally binding conventions. These 3 legally binding agreements that we see. First is the CBD, then we have the UNFCCD, and then we have the UNCCD. So what all are these? We'll be looking at the further slides, but you should know that all of these 3 things are your legally binding agreements. So this is your legally binding agreements that we have. First talks about the biodiversity. The second is how you start with the Conference of Parties. So that is UNFCCC. So this UNFCCC is talking about the Conference of Parties, how we are going to meet each year at different places, and you will be naming those COPs after the places you are meeting. Like we have COP 3, we met in Kyoto, Japan. So we named it as Kyoto Protocol. And then we have the United Nations Convention to combat desertification, because we saw that yes, we have to combat the different causes, and we have to see that there is not much desertification seen. We have to protect the land and the biodiversity. So these are, if they ask you what all are the 3 outcomes of the Earth Summit or 3 outcomes of UNCED or outcomes of Rio Declaration, what will you say? You will say that it was UNFCCC or UNFCCC, it was CBD, or it was UNCCD. These were the 3 legally binding agreements that were seen. And what is legally binding? You will be punished if you don't follow it. But Agenda 21 and Forest Principles, another 2 outcomes of your Earth Summit, are the ones who are not legally binding. So Agenda 21 and Forest Principle are also 2 things that we started to talk when we were discussing about Earth Summit only. So in Earth Summit, all these countries were sitting together and they decided that we'll be taking different initiatives. So in 1992, they sat together, they discussed that yes, we'll be taking initiatives to protect different sectors of the environment. They said that 3 legally binding things would be done. If you don't follow these things, these 3 agreements, then you'll be punishable. So you have the CBD. This is talking about the Convention on Biodiversity, right? Then we have the convention on then we have the UNFCCC. So this is the UNFCCC is talking that each year we'll be meeting and we'll see that all of the agreements that we have taken are rightly followed. So you will be looking at that, yes, there are not much emission of the greenhouse gases, there is protection of the environment, and each year we'll be meeting. So these each year meetings came up to be called as the Conference of Parties. So here, the UNFCCC is basically advising you to follow the rules and regulations, but these Conference of Parties are making you do all of these things. So it is different. I'll give you an example. So take an example. Here we have Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol is COP 3. They were meeting for the 3rd time here. So what is the difference between UNFCCC and the parties that come, or the COP parties that we have under it? So basically, your mother will tell you to study repeatedly. So she'll help you, she'll motivate you to study. But who is going to make you do it? Who is going to force all these things on you? These are the conference of parties. That is basic difference. So UNFCCC was also talking to protect the countries against all of these greenhouse gases that is being emitted. But your COP23, your Kyoto Protocol would come and would force that yes, we have these targets and we have to maintain it. So COPs are like teachers. They'll force you to do all these things, while your UNFCCC is like your mother. They will guide you, right? They'll tell you that you can do all of these things, but the teacher will force you. So this is basic difference. Then we have the UNCCD, that is the compacting of the desertification. We have Agenda 21, we have forest principle, but all of these two things are non-legally binding, and these three things are legally binding. Now let us move further. So this was Rio. And we came up with what? We came up with Agenda 21, as I told you. This is non-legally binding. It is a non-binding agreement. It is the product of the Earth Summit of 1992. It came up with 1992 only. And what is actually the meaning of 21? This is also a PYQ. And they ask one, what is this 21 in this Agenda 21? So 21 refers to the 21st century. It is a non-binding agreement. Then we have a UNFCCC. Again, I told you it came up in 1992. It is legally binding. It is for reducing. This UNFCCC was made because we wanted to protect the country against the emission of the greenhouse gases. So we are talking about the reducing of the greenhouse gases emissions to combat the global warming. We are here asking like a mother. They are asking like a mother to combat the greenhouse gases. It's a environmental treaty produced at the Earth Summit 1992. Secretariat कौन थे यहाँ पे? We had this in Germany. It is a non-binding because we are not forcing it, but COPs would be binding then. So Kyoto Protocol was negotiated under this framework. Then we have the CBD, that is the Convention on Biological Diversity. The Convention on Biological Diversity 1992, again I told you, came under it. It is a legally binding agreement, and the three main principles or the main goals of CBD is Convention on Biological Diversity. Again, it is legally binding. The three main goals are conservation of biological diversity or biodiversity, sustainable use of its components, you have to use those components properly, and sharing the benefits of the genetic resources fairly and equitably. So these are the three outcomes. So you take example of new genetic seeds that we have. So these seeds are produced from where? These are basic seeds that we derive from the biodiversity. So here we first of all have to protect the biodiversity. Secondly, we'll be protecting and we'll be using these resources, these seeds that we have, in a sustainable manner. So there will be sustainable use of the components that we have. Then we have sharing of the benefits. We'll share these benefits properly so that there is sustainable development, protecting it for the future generation also. But this CBD had further two children. So what is basically, we saw that the father of CBD is Earth Summit, but CBD itself has two children now. And what all are these? These two children are your Cartagena Protocol, and this Cartagena Protocol came up when? Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety came up in 2000. And we have the Nagoya Protocol. Nagoya Protocol, the second child of your CBD, came up in 2010. So you should know the names also. So if they ask you what are the outcomes of CBD now, so CBD, first of all, is the Convention on Biological Diversity. We are looking at the different biological diversity, different variety seeds, different flora, fauna, and we are going to protect it. It comes with three aims. First of all, we'll conserve the biodiversity, we'll give biological diversity, and biosafety would be conserved and protected. Then sustainable use of all the resources that we get from it is also seen, and then we'll share the benefits properly with everyone. So there will be favorable use of resources, good use of genetic resources, and we'll be using them equitably, right? Then we said that it is legally binding and it has two protocols under it. Two children are seen by CBD. The first is CARTAGENA. So we have CARTAGENA, and the second is what? The second is NAGOYA. So they are the two children of CBD, and USA has signed but not ratified this document. So USA ने sign किया था but it hasn't ratified the document till now, and it is legally binding as I told you. Then we have the UNCCD. This is the Convention to Combat Desertification. Headquarter, as I told you, is in Bonn, Germany. Only convention that came out of the direct recommendations of the Agenda 21. It is legally binding. Canada, one thing that you should know, Canada first signed it and then withdrew from it. So Canada withdrew from this document or from this desertification convention. And then we have negotiated, it was negotiated under the UNFCCC. It came into force in 2005 further, and it binds the targets to Annex 1 countries. So there are some Annex 1 countries, for them it is a binding document. And it came up, first of all, it started to talk in 1994, and then they are talking about the Convention to Combat Desertification. Then, as I told you, we have UNFCCC. So UNFCCC, they decided that after meeting once, we will be meeting again and again. So this again and again meeting, they decided that what should we call it? UNFCCC, such a long name. Let us now call it as COP, right? So you are educated by your mother, but you spend most of your time with what? With your teacher at your schools. So then they said that we'll be meeting, and these meetings will be called as the Conference of Parties, that is the COP, Conference of Parties. Now each year we are going to meet at different places, and we are going to name the convention or the COPs out of that name, out of that place where we are meeting. So in the third year they are meeting at Kyoto, so they called it as COP3 Kyoto Protocol. It was in 1997. They were here to talk more about the greenhouse gases, to fight the global warming by reduction of the greenhouse gases and its concentration. So UNFCCC started to talk about it, but more initiatives would be taken by the COP. So it is, there are three mechanisms, and all of these three mechanisms were used so that your protection can be done against the emission of the greenhouse gases. Now these are the clean development mechanism, we have the emission trading, and we have the joint implementation trading. So we have the joint implementation. So these are the three mechanisms that we have. We have the clean development mechanism, emission trading, and joint implementation. Then I will be understanding it further in the video. Then we have against the Kyoto Protocol, we should also know that there are some Annex countries, Annex 1 and the non-Annex countries. So Annex 1 countries are those countries that are developed countries, and non-Annex countries are the developing countries. So India would fall under the developing section, while USA would be under your or Canada would be under the developed countries. So this protocol implies that there are some greenhouse gases, and these name of these greenhouse gases are given under Annex A, and this greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur hexafluoride. Then we have the hydrofluorocarbons, that is the HFCs, and we have the perfluorocarbons, that is the PFCs. So the protocol is based on the principle of shared, common but differentiated responsibilities. Now this is another PYQ. So till now we were looking at the legally binding, non-legally binding, but here the agenda of your Kyoto Protocol was common, and write it down, but differentiated responsibilities. what is the meaning of this statement? So in your Kyoto Protocol, we saw that it was signed by a lot of countries. Some were developed, some were not developed. So developed countries or developing countries were few. So do you think that the amount of emission of these greenhouse gases done by your developed countries would be same as by the developing countries? No. So your developed countries would emit more than your developing countries. So they are saying that we come up with an initiative. This is called as the common but differentiated response. We will give response according to ourselves. So if we are a developed country, we emit more greenhouse gases, so we'll reduce more greenhouse emission of the greenhouse gases would be more. But if we are a developing country, then of course we are developing less, but we will still do our bit, right? So this is how it is compulsory for some, not compulsory for some, and the efforts are also different. Hence it is called as common but differentiated response. It places the obligation on the developed countries to reduce the current emissions on the basis that they are historically responsible for the current levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Then we have Annex 1 countries. These are the industrialized countries and the economies in transition. And then we have Annex 2 countries, developed countries which pay for the cost of the developing countries. We have some non-Annex 1 countries. These are the developing countries, and India is a non-Annex party to the UNFCCC. Right? Then we had this question in the previous video also, what all are the 2 commitment periods. So these 2 commitment periods are 2008 to 2012. We have 2013 to 2020. And then the note that you should know, it is also a PYQ. It is also a PYQ. The second commitment period was agreed on 2012, and this is also called as Doha Amendment to the protocol. Why? Because this time they met in Doha. So first of all, they met in Kyoto. So it is called as Kyoto Protocol. They again had different initiatives. Again they said that the target is not fully met. So we want what? We want that another time we should start with the agendas. This time they met in Doha. So they called it in Doha, called it as Doha Amendment, right? So I hope I made things clear. What all are the 2 periods is also one question that they have asked. 2008 to 2012, 2013 to 2020 is the time period of your Kyoto Protocol. Then we have the Rotterdam Convention. It is in 1998. It is the prior informed consent proceed against your hazardous substances. It is protecting you from the chemicals and from the pesticides. It is a UN treaty. Then we have the Cartagena Protocol. This is the child of CBD, as I told you. In 2000, it talks about the biosafety, protection of biological diversity from the potential risk exposed to the living modified organisms and resulting to modern biotechnology. So here they are talking about biosafety, all the genetic species that I was telling you, all the hybrid seeds, and the biotechnology. So because of all these technologies, you have to do what? There should be a biosafety made so that these seeds can be protected. Then we have the Stockholm Convention. Don't compare it with the Stockholm Declaration. So this was in 2001. It talks about, this Stockholm Convention would talk about the POPs, that is the persistent organic pollutants. It is also a PYQ. You should know it is talking about the persistent organic pollutants. So these are the pollutants because of which there is air pollution being caused, and they are also called as the dirty dozen. So USA is not a part of this party, and the Intergovernment Forum of Chemical Safety and the International Program of Chemical Safety came up that there are some of all of these 2 parties said that there are some POPs, that is the persistent organic pollutants that are persistent, that are to be eliminated, that are to be restricted. Because of this, asthmatic problems, other breathing problems are being caused. Because of this, air index is getting deteriorated, and this is basically causing the air pollution. So there is one list that is given by all these forums, the Government Forum of Chemical Safety, and these these chemicals, these POPs are also called as the dirty dozen, right? Then we have the RE, red or the red plus. This is basically, they started with 2005. These are the countries, or this is basically the plan that came up in Bali, and they will be talking about reducing the emissions from the deforestation. They will protect the degradation that is done by the developing or the developed countries. It was again negotiated under the UNFCCC in 2005. Also by this, UN Red has launched, that is the Red Data Book was launched here in 2008, and India did not participate in it for the first time. And this definition of this were given, or this started to be talk in your COP, this came into talk in COP 13. In COP 13, and COP 13 was held in Bali. So you should know that there are different COPs, and they are, this COP, this action plan came up in Bali. Then it talks about the sustainable forest management, conservation of forest, and the carbon sink. So we all know forests are the biggest resources for the carbon sink, and this agenda is talking about those things. Then we have the Nagoya Protocol, another child, as I told you, of CBD in 2010. It came into force. It talks about the genetic resources, the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits that is done, and it is seen under the Convention of Biological Diversity. It was implemented under it. Then we have Rio 20. So after, again, first time they were meeting at, they were meeting in Rio de Janeiro, and that was called as the Earth Summit. It was called as Rio as well. So it was called as the Rio Declaration. So they loved the place, and that place was in Brazil. So Rio is in Brazil. But they said that let us meet again, and this time in Rio 10. If they ask you, Rio 10, they met at Johannesburg. So they said that we are bored from Brazil. We have already seen a lot of Brazil. Let us meet once again in another place. And this time they met in South Africa. They said that Johannesburg is a really nice place. Let us meet there. But they were not satisfied with Johannesburg also. And this convention where they met is called as the World Sustainable Convention on Sustainable Development. So this is also called as the Johannesburg Convention. So they were meeting in Johannesburg, but in Rio 20, that is, and they were meeting here in 2002. So first of all, in 1992, they met in Brazil, that is in Rio. Right, it is called as Rio plus 10, Rio, whatever you want to call it. Then in Rio 10, after 10 years, they again met in 2002, this time in Johannesburg, but they did not like the place. So they said that we'll meet again in the old places for the old time's sakes, and this time Rio plus 20, they met again in the in Rio de Janeiro, that is in Brazil. So this is how they keep on meeting and talking about the sustainable development, the world environment, Earth summits keep on happening, right? And you have to read more about Rio 30. Now this is your homework. What is Rio 30? What were the few agreements or the documents that they signed? What were the basic things that they discussed? So first of all, you should remember in 1992, first of all, there is the Earth Summit, or they first met in Rio. Then in 2002, they will meet again after 10 years, and this time they are meeting in Johannesburg, and first in Brazil, and after this they did not like it, so they decided that we'll meet again, and this time after 20 years. So this is the 20th anniversary, this is the 10th anniversary, so it is called as Rio plus 10. They'll call it as Rio plus 20, and they are meeting again when? In 2012. Again where? Again in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, right? So this is how the things were happening. This is again a conference, and they'll be discussing about sustainable development. It is on the 10th anniversary of the Earth Summit that happened in 1992. Then we have the Paris Agreement. So Paris Agreement is basically, it is COP 21. So in COP 21 they are meeting at Paris, so it is called as Paris Agreement. And what is the date? The date is 2015, and we discussed it in greater detail, so I won't go there. And it is talking about the climate change. It says that the temperature should be limited. It should be below 1.5, ideally 1.5, but below 2 degrees Celsius according to the pre-industrial levels. So it came into force in 2020. It is not legally binding. They are talking about the global temperature rise and they want it to be below 2 degrees Celsius according to the pre-industrial level. They pursue the efforts till the time they can further reduce it to 1.5 not 5, 1.5 degree Celsius. Right? So there are some Indian NDC'S. As I told you, these INDC'S or these NDC'S are the heart of the Paris Agreement. They are that the greenhouse gas emissions would be reduced according to the GDP by 30 to 35% below the 2005 levels by 2030. All of them are very important. That is why I included it here. You should note it down, make your own notes. By 2030, we'll reduce the greenhouse gas emission from 30 to 35%, right? And according to the, again remember it, 2005 is the level to which they are comparing, and by 2030 40% of the energy would be generated from the non-fossil fuels, and then we'll increase the forest cover. And if we increase the forest cover, we also talked it by the time we were discussing the REDD, right? So they said that we will create additional carbon sinks, additional forest area, so that we can protect it from 2.5 to 3 billion more equivalent area carbon sink would be created, and so that we can protect the country or the countries from the emission of carbon dioxide by 2030, and USA withdrew from all these agreements. Then we have the Kigali Agreement. So Kigali Amendment came up in 2016. It says that we have to reduce the ozone layer depletion. It is an amendment that is talking and in reference to the Montreal Protocol, that is in 1987. The aim was to reduce the hydrofluorocarbons, the HFCs, and roughly you are reducing the HFCs by, this is also a PYQ, you are reducing, I am writing it here, you are reducing the HFCs roughly by 80 to 85%, 80 to 85% by 2045, and it will be binding on the member countries by 2019. But here one good thing is that India got a leverage, and India said that by 2045 we'll do it, not by 2019. Some of the countries said that by 2019 we are going to do it, but India, being a developing country, said that we'll do it by 2045, right? So now we have this question and I want you to quickly solve it. This is the first question. This is list 1. This is list 2. We have Montreal Protocol, Paris Agreement, Climate Action Plan, and we have Kyoto Protocol. And I'm pretty sure that you guys know the answer right now. We have D as the right answer. We have D as the right answer. A would be matched with 3. A would be matched with 3. So we have discussed all of this. B by 4. B would be matched by 4, and then we have C by 1. C would be matched by 1, and we have Kyoto Protocol that talks about the emissions trading. So let us quickly discuss. Montreal Protocol talks about phasing out of the ozone depleting substances. We have discussed it, that Montreal Protocol is talking about the ODS, that is ozone depleting substances. Then we have the Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement gave us what? It gives us intended nationally determined contributions. These I told you, these INDC'S are the heart of your, such a bad heart of your Paris Agreement, right? You should remember this line. Then we have the Climate Action Plan. It talks about the integrated water resource management. Then we have Kyoto Protocol. It talks about the emission trading, right? So we already discussed this question. So we will jump. I think we discussed 3 of these questions, and we will be discussing the remaining few in the video that we have now. Okay, so this is the question from where we will be start discussing that. The question that we previously discussed was the question that we did in the previous video also. So under Kyoto Protocol, the first commitment period for the reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions by the 37 industrialized European community countries were what? So they are basically asking about the commitment period. And what is the first commitment period? We all know the answer. It is from 2008 to 2012. I would read it. In the United Nations Convention, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, that is the UNFCCC, we said that we will start with meeting different conference of parties would be there, and in Japan we met in 1997. Kyoto Protocol came, and under the protocol these 37 industrialized countries committed themselves to reduce the emission by 5.2% to the industrial level and keep on writing these notes, and by the recent level that they will be discussing or the comparing it to, that is of the 1990 levels by 2012. So from 1990 to 2012 ke level pe they will be discussing it. Under this, the country can finance the carbon dioxide saving measures in another country and thus offsets its own emissions. So they will be protecting one another. The first commitment period, it is from 2008 to 2000, and then we had the industrialized countries are committed to do specific reductions here, and the Kyoto Protocol requires the countries to cut the emissions of the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So some 141 countries accounting for 55% of the greenhouse gas emissions have ratified the Kyoto Protocol, and it started when it came into force in 2005, right? So it pledges to cut the emission by 2.5 during the first implementation level or the first period, that is from 2008 to 2000. Each country has set its own individual targets according to the pollution levels. So the large developing countries including India, China, Brazil are not required to meet these specific targets as for now because they are still developing. There is different positions within the political debate according to the climatic conditions, and this is differentiated, and hence we are talking about common but differentiated response. So the Kyoto Protocol specifies 3 flexible mechanisms to meet all of these things. The first is the clean development mechanism. So this clean development mechanism, it is called as the CDM. It is a system that would give industrialized countries credit for financing technologies in developing countries aimed at reducing emissions. So what is it? I would read again. CDM is a system that would give industrialized countries. This is where, so first of all you should know that there are, as I told you, there are 2 types of countries. There are some developing countries and there are some developed countries. So under CDM, what is happening? Here we see that there are developed countries, the developed industrialized countries. Say for example, there is Canada and here is India. Right, so there are these 2 countries that we have, and we all know that Canada, being a developed country, will emit a larger amount of carbon dioxide, larger amount of greenhouse gases. So say it is it has their target, the target that is given according to the Kyoto Protocol is 100. So they said that you can emit greenhouse gases in this one period is 100 only. 100 only can be emitted by you. And India, being developing, is doing only 50. So what is it? What are they doing? They are saying that according to the clean development mechanism, it is the mechanism where the industrialized country credit the financing technologies in developing countries. So Canada would say, I will maintain a plant or I will build a plant in India so that I can compromise these credits that I have, or I can compromise that yes, maybe I am giving out a lot of pollution, but I can compromise it by developing another plant in India using a good technology that can emit less amount of carbon dioxide. So this is how clean development mechanism can be done. Then there can be joint implementation activities. So those joint implementation activities undertaken by the Kyoto Protocol was forced by the forestry sector. The forests, as you know, act as a carbon sink, and as the tree grows, they absorb carbon dioxide and the air. About 50% of the dry weight of a tree is carbon, we all know, and it can be protected. So the joint implementation is when one developed country is making a plant or doing some activity in another developed country. So here we saw that there is Canada and India, that means one developed, one developing. But in the Joint Implementation Act, we see that there are two countries, say US and Canada are two countries, and US के targets are बहुत ज़्यादा, they are producing a lot of carbon dioxide, so they'll make another joint implementation act with Canada, and Canada के अगर it is increasing, so it will make amendments with USA. So two developing countries can do that. Then there can be emission trading. So this is emission trading is also a mechanism by which they can protect the you can say the protect the emission of a lot of greenhouse gases. So again you can take an example here. In emission trading you can take example of India and Canada again. So we have Canada and we have India. So there are again some goals that are decided. So according to Kyoto Protocol, Canada can have a pollution level or emission of carbon dioxide to say greenhouse gas emission to 100, and India can do it to say 100 only. 100, right? But we all know that Canada, both of them have 100 goals, right? But Canada being a developed country will definitely emit more. So Canada said that there is 1 to 5 points of emission that we have. So these are the credit points that we had. So we are exceeding it. We are exceeding it by 25. And we know that India is being a developing country cannot emit 100. So they said that we are only doing 40. So that means 60 credits are still left with us. So India has 60 credits still left. So what is happening? Canada would say what? Okay, you are actually doing less. So can I give you my extra credits so that we can balance all these things out? So this is emission trading. This is like a trading which these two countries can do in, with each other. This is a trading where Canada said that as I am releasing a lot of greenhouse gases, maybe we can, India, we can compromise with one another. So here India and Canada could jointly work together, right? So this is how the assigned amount units are balanced together, right? So these 100 and 100, as I told you, they are called as the assigned amount units, AAU. So AAU of Canada is 100, India is 100, but Canada did 125. That means 25 extra here, right? So what to do with these 25 extra credits? I would give it to India because India is doing less. So this is how your emission trading can be done. Then another question, the Environment Protection Act 1986 was the first of India's commitment to take appropriate action for the protection and implementation of Environment Act. We'll see the answer because we have already discussed it. It is D, that is the United Nations Conference on Human Development, Stockholm in 1972. We started with the Environment Protection Act in 1986. So the EPA's origins may be traced back to the United Nations Conference on the Human Development, that is the Stockholm Conference, which was held in Stockholm in June 1972, attended by India. The goal was to taking sustainable steps to actually improve the human environment. The Act implements the decisions taken by the Stockholm Conference. The Environment Protection Act was passed in 1986 to ensure environmental protection. So this is also that. Now we have, I think this is the last question. So we have Kyoto Protocol, Montreal Protocol, Paris Agreement, and we have International Solar Alliance. So we discussed International Solar Alliance in the class in greater detail. So I hope you can match the list 1 with the list 2, clean and affordable energy, clean development mechanism, internationally determined contribution, and phase out of the chlorinated compounds. So we discussed all of it. A is the right answer. That means A would be joined with 2. The Kyoto Protocol talks about what? I told you there are 3 mechanisms, and the first is the clean development mechanism. Then we have the JI joint implementation, and then we have the emission trading. So this is the clean development mechanism, A with 2. Then we have Montreal Protocol. Montreal Protocol is talking about all the ODS. That means the phasing out of the chlorinated compounds. Then we have the Paris Agreement, and Paris Agreement says that there are some nationally determined contributions. We have learned this till now. Abhi tak to we can, I'm sure you have all learned it. And International Solar Alliance, it talks about the clean and affordable energy. It says how we will be making more and more energy from the solar panels and using the solar energy now. Right? So I know it was a class which was bombarded with a lot of facts, but I wanted to conduct this class. We discussed a lot of protocols, and in fact every protocol that is important was discussed in these two classes. We discussed fairly good amount of questions related to that as well. I'll show you the slides once so that you can take screenshots if you want to. You can pause the video and take screenshots as well. So first of all, we discussed about the RAMSAR Convention. We had discussed about the RAMSAR Convention. Then we had the Stockholm Declaration. Then we discussed about the CITES. Then we discussed about the CMS. So 4. Then we discussed about Nairobi Declaration. 5th, 6th and 7th, we had the Vienna Convention, which talks about the ozone layer protection. Montreal Protocol was the 7th. We have the BRUNDTLAND report, and after this, sustainable development was at vogue. We started talking about sustainable development and management. Then we have 9th, that is the Earth Summit. It is also called as the UNCED. It is also called as Rio Declaration, and it happened in 1992. We discussed that there are some legally binding children and there are some binding, non-legally binding. So Agenda 21 stands for 21st century, and forest principle are non-binding, and with CBD, UNFCCC and UNCCD are binding here. Then after 9th, we had this 10th, that is Agenda 21, 11 UNFCCC, under which we discuss different COPs, right? Then we have 12th, that is, I hope I'm remembering correct, that is the CBD. Now we discussed that CBD ke bhi do bache hain, and what all are these two kids that we have, Cartagena and Nagoya. And in 2000, it is in 2000, and here it is in 2010, right? Then we have 13th, it talks about the UNCCD. Then we have 14th, we discussed about Kyoto Protocol today. And Kyoto Protocol, we discussed about Annex 1 countries, Annex 1 countries and that are industrialized, Annex 2 countries, non-Annex 1 countries, and India is a part of the non-Annex 1 countries, right? Sorry, I forgot the 14th. Okay, so then we had the 15th, that is the Rotterdam. And we also discussed that what was the time frame, and I showed you the questions related to this time frame also, and how this 2013 would be called as another Doha Amendment, right? So this is your 14th, 15th, then we have 16th Cartagena, then we have 17th Stockholm, 18th, 19, 20, 21, 22. Okay, so we had these 22 protocols that we discussed. I hope you will understand, you understood all of these things properly, and if not, keep on revising this video again and again. Stop it, make your own notes. There are few very important details that are given here. If you have any doubts, you can write it in the comment section. I try to make things as lucid as I can. So thank you so much for listening and being a patient listener. I hope you do well in your exams. Thank you so much.